This is the Bat Flip Podcast. Now here's your host, Damian, David, and Matt.
Hey, everybody, and welcome into the final season preview edition of the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Matt, and I'm here today with David. And guess what? We get to talk about everyone's favorite team now. Save the best for last, and that's going to be the Atlanta Braves, my team. And they do have the second best World Series odds. So if they're going to be our last out, since we already did the Dodgers before their Japan series. So the Atlanta Braves in 2024 made the playoffs for the seventh year in a row. But they did not win the division. They had won 6 divisions in a row. They did not win the division last year. They were hampered by injuries. Acuña, Riley, Albies, Harris, Murphy, everyone missed time except for Olsen. So it was a disastrous year on the offensive side for the Braves. Their offense went from a historically good offense in 2023, took a massive step back last year, and the pitching staff carried the load because Chris Sale won the Cy Young, and they were able to fight their way into the playoffs, by tying for the last wild card spot, and they lost in the wild card round. So. The Braves have had a fairly quiet offseason. They've made some moves. They're at a kind of a state where I think the farm system's okay. The core is still lined up pretty well for the future. They've signed all these guys to extensions. So, but David, what do you think the overall state of the Braves is here?
Complete disaster franchise, just a terrible group. What are they doing? Look at this downward trend we're looking at. For all the complaining and grouse and Matt's doing, they won 89 games, made the playoffs. Like a lot of teams would definitely take that in a down year. I'll tell you that. I feel like the arrows are pointing right back up to where they were. Obviously, the playoff odds reflect that. This is a well-run organization in a right in the middle of a competitive window with a ton of talent and a ton of guys returning from injuries. I was telling Matt before, you can't complain anymore about the IL bug, right? They leave that in the 2024. Everybody's coming back. There's already been some injuries, but those guys are going to be, right as rain. I feel like this team is going to be really, really strong this year. I didn't even pick them to win their division again, but I feel like that might be like a 2024 hangover a little bit, where I'm still feeling like they're in the downward spiral of last year, where that kind of cascaded on itself to take a 100+ win team and dropped it down to 89. I do feel this is a good team, and I think our predictions here and our discussions are going to reflect that.
Absolutely. So I guess we'll start off with the what they did this offseason. Their ads, they added platoon outfielder in De La Cruz. Jerkson Profar was the big signing. They added Alex Verdugo. He's going to start in AAA. Craig Kimbrell, Hector Neris, a couple relievers coming off of down years, minor league free agents. They traded for Jose Suarez literally like 2 days ago. They traded Ian Anderson for him. Brought in Davis Daniel as a trade acquisition, and then Nick Allen to be like the backup infielder. So, very interesting list of ads here. The big one's obviously Jerkson Profar coming off an all-star season last year. He put up a like a 130 something WRC plus, playing left field for the Padres. There were a lot of really good under the hood adjustments that he made too. That really kind of there were a lot of signs that like that was a real breakout for him and not just a kind of a fake thing. And the Braves really got if he's able to put that up again, the Braves got a really good deal for him. So, but other than him, the list of ads is a little underwhelming for a team that said they were increasing payroll. But David, any of these other ads really stand out to you as guys that are going to play a really good role for this team that you really like?
I fear they don't. None of them really stand out, especially the Craig Kimbrell experience coming back to Atlanta. That will be fun. Him returning, I think he'll get time once he ramps up. He obviously signed pretty late in spring. That'll be the fun one to follow. Hoping, of course, that he winds up with some kind of role on this team. I think Craig Kimbrell can still be a good reliever. He's still got good stuff. It's just a matter of getting. I think he's a guy that reacts. He's very mental. He makes some big shifts in his mentality, and that winds up affecting his pitching. I do like the Brian De La Cruz signing. He had a home run today against Brent Brown. That's a guy that Marlins for a while, swings a lot. right? Doesn't walk much at all. But those types of players can go off and have crazy big seasons, especially when they're given the role that he should have, which is kind of that he's going to step in on guys who has good matchups with. He's going to get a chance to, hit for power in a lineup that there's always going to be guys on base in front of him because this is a scary lineup and he's going to be hitting well down in the order with that much power. I mean, he's going to run into a bunch of 2 and 3 run home runs. It slams like that's a dangerous hitter down in the lineup, and he can swing all the time, and it might result in a low OBP, but he's going to have a high slug and ultimately drive in a lot of runs. So he may be the most impactful non-Profar guy, but I really love the Profar move overall. I think he's a perfect fit for what the Braves have needed in left field for a few years. Like you've talked about the hole in left field for a while. I feel like Profar just fits it super naturally. He doesn't even have to be the guy he was last year in San Diego. He can be just decent and be an improvement on what the Braves have had in left field.
Yeah, I think my biggest one out of them is Craig Kimbrell,
Yeah.
because his stuff is still really good. And if
Mhm.
he can throw strikes this year, which has been an inconsistent thing year to year, but when he throws strikes, he's still really good. I think that could be really, really helpful for them. But moving on,
You didn't put Jesse Chavez on the ads.
well, he's
What?
not an ad. He was there last year.
He'll be. Oh, you're right. Good point. But
So
he's there. Jesse Chavez is here
Jesse
again.
Chavez is going to be an all-star in 2025. Write it down.
Again.
I'm not being serious right now, kinda. But I guess we can move on to subtractions, which Jesse Chavez almost was, but he became a Brave again, so he's not a subtraction anymore. AJ Minter lost him free agency to the Mets. Max Fried, the Yankees. Adam Duvall, Whit Merrifield, Gio Urshela all played roles last year, but didn't do a ton. Charlie Morton they lost. That's one that's been there a long time. Not a great year last year, but you're still losing a guy who was a solid number 4, number 5 starter. Ramon Laureano they non-tendered kind of interestingly, especially since Acuna is going to miss the start of the season. Ian Anderson they traded, and they traded Jorge Soler since with the outfield coming back this year from the injuries. Jorge Soler became kind of obsolete. Ozuna is going to DH. He can't play the outfield. It was a disaster last year when he was in the outfield. He can hit. He can still hit, but he can't play the outfield. So, but yeah, out of these subtractions, obviously Max Fried's going to be the big one. But and Charlie Morton to a little bit of a lesser extent. He gave really good innings at times. It's a little inconsistent the last couple of years, but he still had really good outings. Other than those guys, AJ Minter is probably the name that comes to mind. But any of these others that you want to highlight that might be bigger losses than we're kind of giving it credit for?
I don't think so, right? This is, of course, the team that's kind of the most obvious of all of our 30 teams here. The guys that they lost are the big names, right? It's Max Fried, it's Charlie Morton. The biggest thing I see from this subtractions list and comparing it to our ads list is that they did not go out and get a starter to
Yeah,
supplant the Max Fried and Charlie Morton losses. Spencer Strider will come back this season. He's already back. He looks fantastic. But that is 2 starters they lost, and they're replacing him with 1. So my thought is they're probably going to need another starter down the stretch here. Knowing the Braves, right? This is a very good development team. They're usually really good at pulling starters out of their butts to be really great. Spencer Strider is a perfect example of that. Um, who's that guy is my question to you because obviously they didn't add anybody, and you said they were going to increase payroll. I thought they were going to increase payroll. I
yeah,
think we all kind of assumed the Braves were going to be in on a few of these guys.
yeah.
They weren't. So what's the plan?
Well, I will say they were in on a couple of them. They were in on Jeff Hoffman. They were going to
Mm,
transition him to a starter, but he failed his physical. I mean, they were going to sign him to a pretty big contract. And then I believe I heard a rumor they were also in on Verlander before he signed with the Giants, which would have been
mm,
interesting, but they didn't trust his physical either. So I don't know if that was the case or not. I do know that the Hoffman thing, that's been pretty widely reported, but that was definitely interesting. I do think they probably wanted to add a starter, but we'll get to it when we talk about the
mhm.
pitchers. I do think they've got some options that they really want to
Cool.
see how they do at the big league level because they've been kind of in that like AAA big league, like they've kind of been blocked for a few years, and they really want to see them like long term. Can they hold down a rotation spot for a half the season and take off? So,
Mhm.
but I guess we can we'll talk first about the bats here in 2025. So we got Profar in left. We talked about him. Michael Harris, excellent defensive center fielder. We'll see if he has his full breakout or if he's gonna keep just being a really good player. Jared Kelenic is going to start the season in right. Obviously, that'll eventually be Ronald Acuña Jr., but with him still in the IL for the first month, Jared Kelenic will be out there in right. He'll platoon with De La Cruz, we would assume. Ozuna, DH, was one of the best hitters in baseball last year. Going to be back at DH. He's had a really good spring. Olsen at first. Albies at second. Arcia still let short for some reason. Austin Riley is at third. And then behind the plate, Sean Murphy, you can see down there, injured as well. Drake Baldwin, the number 11 prospect, according to Fangraphs, and a guy who's had an excellent spring, is going to be the opening day catcher for the Braves, which is very interesting that they went with him. And they do have some other big league veterans in their non-roster invites, in their
Mhm.
Kurt Casale, Chadwick Trump, Sandy Leone. They have some veteran guys, so Drake Baldwin's going to get some run here in the big leagues. But a lot of this is kind of the same group. It's the same core as I mentioned at the beginning. You got they've signed so many guys to extensions: Riley, Albies, Olsen, Harris, Acuna, long-term contracts. Now, of course, Profar's on a medium term. He's signed a 3-year deal. So, but yeah, David, obviously, there's not a lot of holes here once you plug in the injured players, except for, I guess, Arcia, even though he's fine defensively. He hit ninth. It's not a big deal. Are there any of these guys that, some of them struggled a little bit last year compared to how they have typically performed in their careers? Are there any of these guys that you're a little bit concerned about, taking that step back they might have taken last year, or maybe something about them that's not going to make them as good this year as they have been in the past?
Yeah, I'm not. I guess my concern isn't that these guys aren't going to be good, because I think as a whole, this group is going to find success. There's going to be an MVP candidate here, right? We've seen Matt Olson, Acuna, Riley all get MVP votes in the last couple of years. I feel like Michael Harris has the ceiling to be an MVP candidate. I feel like this projection is really aggressive, given that he was coming off a 2-WAR season last year. But I do think that there's an MVP caliber player in Michael Harris. He's probably the most volatile of any of these guys, where if he hits really well, he's elite. And if he, doesn't hit well, he's just a good defensive center fielder, which is still very, very valuable in today's, the game of Major League Baseball. But, with all of the Braves still have found a way to have an exciting young team despite returning a bunch of guys, right? And having a bunch of long-standing veterans. That's very rare, where you are looking at a Drake Baldwin who might go out and win Rookie of the Year, right? Or Sean Murphy comes back and you've got a younger but still a veteran player that is, right in the prime of his career, coming off an extension. He's been injured a little bit, and he might just get going and provide really good value at catcher and go back to being a top 5 catcher in the game. Like, there's just so many options here. So I don't see any downside to most of these guys. Like Orlando, like really, Arcia is the worst option on this page, and he's still a pretty good defensive shortstop who can hit ninth in a good lineup. Like, you could hide him.
Yeah.
This lineup is has very few holes. I still think Kelenic and De La Cruz are fine platoon right field. Even if this was the lineup all season and Acuna missed, I still think this is a really good lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was gonna point out a couple. I'm a little concerned about Ozzy Albies. The swing and miss has been pretty bad the last couple of years. The chase rate is awful, and there's just a little bit of I don't know. His defense has really regressed, but we'll see if he's. I mean, he's not going to be a black hole or anything. He's a good player still, but going from being a all-star multiple times, I don't know if he's going to be at that level anymore. And I will point out one other thing. Acuna is coming in here. We're expecting him to come back to his MVP form. And if you remember last time he came off the knee injury, his most of season that he played, which will be similar to this season, he was not the same guy. And then the next year he was like the best player we've ever seen. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to hit the ground running this time, or if it's going to be a little bit of a lag back here at the beginning of the season.
I have a thought on Albies. His last 4 seasons, 3.7 WAR, 1.1 WAR, 4.1 WAR, 1.3 WAR.
Yeah.
This is his season to have a big season.
Yep.
And I only ever see Ozzy Albies looking like Barry Bonds.
Yeah, because the Cubs,
because he plays a kid like Barry Bonds against the Cubs. Yeah. Look it up. He is crazy against the Cubs. I've only ever seen the guy cranking home runs, doubles down the line. Like, I genuinely have no idea how you ever even see that he's bad. But then again, I don't watch all the Braves games, so look, like I completely believe in Ozzy Albies. Think
Yeah.
he's just a great player. And it seems like he just kind of fluctuates year to year. Reminds me of early career Manny Machado, where Manny would have a really good season, mediocre season, really good season, I think it's Ozzy Albies' time to have a really big season.
Yeah. Well, I sure hope so. That would be good for the program. Last note, prospects to know. Nacho Alvarez is still here. He's going to start the season on the IL. He's got some kind of wrist issue. He got a lot of hype. He came up last year, played a little bit for like a week, but he's had pretty good numbers in the minor league still. We'll see if he's able to, to continue to become a big leaguer. There's a little bit of concern about the power with him and if he's going to hit the ball hard enough, but we'll see. But we'll move on now and talk about the pitchers. And this is where I think the Braves are really, I think they're underrated in a lot of ways on this front. And I think they're going to be very good. Chris Sale won the Cy Young last year. Ronaldo Lopez had a better ERA than Chris Sale last year. I don't know if it ended up being better, but he hit a sub-3 ERA. Spencer Schwellenbach came out of nowhere last year and was really good, and he showed up this spring even better. He's looked awesome. Grant Holmes came out of nowhere and actually was an effective starter. He's looked really good this spring too. He's going to be in the rotation opening day. And then the guy I mentioned earlier, we were talking about the losses and the fact they didn't add any pitchers. Well, AJ Smith-Shawver is one of the guys, and AJ Smith-Shawver's stuff is out of this world right now. Like he looks so good this spring. Command's been a little bit of a problem in the past, but man, I'm excited for him. And then obviously you see Spencer Strider down there coming off the injury. He's going to miss the first few weeks, but he's pitched some in the spring already. He's going to be on a rehab assignment immediately. He should be back in just a couple weeks. So deep rotation here, I would say. David, you got any thoughts here?
You said underrated. I don't know who's underrated in this group. I've said this Braves team's it's a good rotation. We just did the Phillies. We talked about it. I felt like, it's the Phillies, Dodgers, Mariners. I think this group's probably number 4, sitting right in there behind them, and it's pretty easy to sit there and go, well, when Strider gets back, they might be number 2.
Yeah.
Or number 1. Like it's very possible. And you need a healthy Spencer Strider, I think, to get to that level. But that's a big step. And AJ Smith-Shawver and Grant Holmes are your kind of these solutions to my earlier question. And I'm going to be intrigued. Grant Holmes is especially intriguing because you're right. He's kind of come out of nowhere. I think he's got a really fun story where he was kind of an unheralded minor leaguer, going to retire and ended up making the Braves. And, he's been able to parlay that into now being a member of this rotation. And I'll tell you, I think the extension for him at like 10 years for $15 million at, and 10% to Braves charity is on its way. Lock him in and it'll be generational wealth for him, and the Braves will get like $1 million a year kind of contract. But I love this rotation. I think it's fantastic. What they did with Ronaldo Lopez is crazy. We talk about teams doing this and trying to grab another guy like the Mets are trying to do with Clay Holmes and stuff. I don't know that anybody's going to get as much out of the reliever conversion back to pitcher as the Braves did last year with Ronaldo Lopez.
Yeah, that was an incredible. Like I was shocked all year when he was as good as he was. The reason I mentioned underrated, I think that Spencer Schwellenbach projection is way too low.
It could be.
I'm huge on Spencer Schwellenbach, and I also think AJ Smith-Shawver, if he sticks in the rotation, is better than a one WAR. I think he's going to end up being really good for them. So those are just two guys that I think have a lot of upside. And of course, there's a little bit of downside. Lopez definitely outperformed his peripherals last year. Strider coming off of injury. He looked great in his spring starts, but he's coming off of injury. You don't know how he's going to perform when he's having to pitch 6-7 innings, throw 100 pitches, that kind of thing. But really good rotation here. Bullpen, they've got a good back end. Jose Iglesias is awesome. Pierce Johnson is really good. He's become a real consistently good reliever. I love Aaron Bummer. Aaron Bummer is awesome. He is super underrated, even by the Braves, because you know what? The Braves would not use him in high leverage situations last year for whatever reason. But every time he came out there, he'd strike out 2 guys and then go grounder, and it was just he was awesome last year. Dylan Lee's been pretty consistently good for this team. So you got a good back four at the back there. Then it falls off.
Yeah.
Hector Neris, I hated on the Cubs for signing him last year. Now, granted, the Braves only signed him to a minor league deal, and so there's not a lot of risk there. They didn't tie up several $1,000,000 and then not sign another reliever because they got him. But they're not counting on him. But obviously he's going to be in here at the beginning of the season. Daysbel Hernandez is interesting. He throws really hard. He's got a good slider. He's been up and down with the big league some. De Los Santos isn't too much, and Jose Suarez is the guy they brought in with for Ian Anderson. So, and don't forget Craig Kimbrell is sitting there in AAA. He's going to ramp up over the next couple of weeks. I guarantee you he's going to replace Neris or De Los Santos. So, David, any thoughts on the bullpen here? Anybody there that you want to point out?
I actually do like Aniel De Los Santos. He had some nasty stuff a few years ago. I do think a team like the Braves can unlock a little extra because he struggled real bad. The last year, he was a guy that I think the Padres had dumped, White Sox had dumped. Like he just really struggled. I do feel like a team with good pitching depth can get the stuff back to where it was before. Do you think the injury to Joe Jimenez is kind of impactful here? Because you mentioned the back three. I do think you're absolutely correct with Bummer, Pierce, Raisel Iglesias. Like they're all really good. But Joe Jimenez was that extra fourth piece, and I think moving Dylan Lee from that middle relief to kind of a later inning role is kind of questionable. But my theory is Craig Kimbrell just comes in and takes over that fourth, dynamite reliever that you need in the playoffs. And now we're good. Also, Smith Shawver could probably fill that role in the playoffs, and Grant Holmes can probably jump into the rotate or into the bullpen as well once we get down there. So having such a deep starting rotation is going to carry over into having a deep bullpen. I love the way this thing is set up, and they're going to be well positioned to make a trade as well and get somebody for pretty cheap.
Yeah, Grant Holmes pitched in the bullpen a lot last year and was really good in that role. And I want to point out, too, we've got those prospects to know listed down there. Hurston Waldrop is one. I think that Hurston Waldrop could end up being a better reliever than starter. That's a transition he might make. He's got a really kind of a little bit of a violent delivery. And he's really a two-pitch guy right now. His fastball is not great. He throws hard, but the spin rate, the shape isn't great. But he's got a insanely good splitter. And I think that could really play up in the bullpen. So that might be something that they end up looking at if the starting rotation shakes out where you've got 6 guys here that are all capable of being good starters. You might look at Hurston Waldrop getting a look there. And then Drew Hackenberg's kind of an interesting prospect. The dude is absolutely gigantic. No, sorry, I'm thinking of someone else, the big guy. But yeah, Drew Hackenberg was a former pretty high draft pick. He had a really good year last year in the minors. Put up a 3.07 ERA between high A all the way up to AAA last year, as the Braves promote guys rapidly when they perform well. So definitely a lot to like here in the rotation. And I guess we can move on and talk here about the outlook for 2025. So the over/under win total for the Braves is 93.5. So David, are you taking the over/under there?
I took the over for the Phillies. The Phillies were right around the same number, 91, I think, was the Phillies. I took the over there. I'm also going to take the over here, and I have both of these teams fighting at around 94, 95 wins to win this NL East. I did pick the Phillies. I'm thinking that there's just a little more urgency with the Phillies. This is still a very young Braves team with regard to all of those extensions that we talk about all the time, with regard to all of the pitching development that you're seeing. That's not to say I think the Braves are necessarily a worse team than the Phillies at this point. I think they are very close together, and very close together being the second and third best teams in baseball, right, is where I'm at with these two groups. I think you're looking at two of the best starting rotations in baseball, two of the best offenses in baseball, and they're going to be fighting tooth and nail. And I think they are both a pretty heavy step above the Mets right now. And that's kind of important because you look at what the Mets did this offseason, right? They went and got Juan Soto. The Braves don't have to counter with anything. This offseason was quiet. And one of their biggest division rivals went out and signed Juan Soto. And they're still a favorite over them. And I feel really good about them being a favorite over them, which says so much about the development path of this group internally, how they're able to maintain things year to year. Their answer is effectively Jurickson Profar, who was a guy who had a 140 WRC plus last year. That was their best free agent signing. He was still a really good, underrated guy that I feel like signed for a steal of a contract. So I don't know how the Braves always do it, but over on this, bet all these. I don't really. We're not making like gambling advice or anything, but like that odds to win the World Series is still pretty good. This group is really nasty. We didn't even barely talk about Chris Sale, who won the Triple Crown for pitching
Yeah,
last year, but there's not much to say. He's so good. He's Chris Sale. If he's healthy, he's going to be one of the best pitchers in baseball. Like, I love this team. This is a great team. I don't love this team like Matt loves this team, but like in terms of a pure analysis standpoint, this team is fantastic. It's going to go really far. I think in the playoffs, going to win a lot of games this season, more than 93.
yeah. So I think I'm going to take the under on the win total, just slight under. And the only reason I'm going to do that is because Acuna is going to miss the first month, and I think Strider might take a little bit of time to get fully built up. I know he's looked really good in his couple of spring starts. His velocity wasn't fantastic, it was good, especially in the first inning, but it did drop off into that 94, 95 range by the end of his outing. He's still working back, and I do think that there's some risk there where your two star players, your best. Chris Sale would say your best pitcher. I think Chris Sale's our best pitcher, but he says Spencer Strider's the Braves' best pitcher, and Ronald Acuña Jr. is obviously your best position player. Both of those guys being hampered to start the season, and then hopefully by midseason they're in full swing. I think this is a team that might start a little bit slow, and then really have a great second half and make the playoffs. Of course, I think they're going to win like 91 to 92 games, maybe even 93. But I don't know that they're going to be like this over 93 and a half 100-win team type that they have been in the past few years. Not last year, but the previous couple of years. So I really, really like the Braves. Obviously, I think they're great. We have a great team. I'm going to say we because I'm a Braves fan, and I'm going to take the. I've been objective in this. I've been very objective in this analysis, so I'm not going to. I am going to say we though. I'm excited for this team. Ready for opening day, and we'll see. The odds to win the NL East plus 110. They are the favorite there, and then the odds to win the World Series, as mentioned at the beginning of the episode, second best behind the Dodgers, plus 750. It's going to be an exciting season for the Atlanta Braves. But David, you got any final thoughts?
Remember when the NL Central in 2015 had 397 plus win teams?
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that's going to be the NL East this year. I'm not going to lie to you. I kind of feel like that's where we're going to trend to. I don't think it's going to be quite that crazy, but I think we could have 390 plus win teams in this division, and I think that's pretty sweet. This is going to be competitive and stressful, obviously, if you're a Braves fan, but I mean, you got this is a really good team. I do think this group is capable of winning the World Series. I think you guys have a lot to cheer for this year, and obviously with a lot of young guys. I think that even doing this specific episode has opened my eyes to the amount of youth currently working through the Braves system. Right, there's a whole lot of youth in the rotation, more than I even was expecting. Right, with Smith Shawver there, so it's a good group. I think they're going to win a lot of games. I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah, well, I am hoping so. But I guess that will wrap it up for us. This was the last episode of the series. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, check out all of the previous ones. We've done all 30 teams. I'm going to be putting this up on opening day. So, they'll all be posted, and we will make sure that the last episode is posted before the games start so that we're not reacting to games. But don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you next time.